It's a perfect storm coming. The run that's to be made in gold is eclipsed only by the run that's to be made in silver. The market is poised. The gold price will run. And as you know, gold equities are a tremendous leverage play as the gold price is increasing.
Hey friends, welcome back and thanks so much for joining us. I'm really excited about this interview. I have to tell you, we had some technical glitches trying to get the audio. We couldn't even hear each other as we began this recording here. It's Rich Munson, and he's the CEO of Sandspring Resources. Got to tell you guys, you know how YouTube has been demonetizing just about every other video I've done? Rich Munson reached out to me after my Keith Neumeier interview. Guess what? He's going to sponsor some banner ads over at SGT Report, so I'm very grateful for the support, just as I am the support from our wonderful patrons. Rich joins us right now to talk about the gold market. Is gold poised to go far higher in 2019? I think many of us believe this is our year for silver, probably too. Rich, thanks so much for joining us.
Appreciate the opportunity, Sean. I've watched quite a few of your presentations and interviews, including the most recent one with Keith. So, as you mentioned, and I think we're kind of all in the same mode of thinking at the moment.
Well, I really appreciate you reaching out. And, you know, I've interviewed Keith many times over the years. And as a shareholder of AG and First Mining Finance, I'm always eager to get an update from Keith because I know him personally. And I guess all of us who have weathered the storm of the mining sector for so long are kindred spirits at this point. You and I were kind of joking about that off air. Your company at one point back in 2000, correct me if I'm wrong here, 2013 was worth $450 million, something like that. And today, this bloodbath has resulted in your market cap for Sandspring Resources being a mere $50 million. So we'll talk about the company in a second, but how have you personally weathered the storm?
Well, you know, I've been with this project, Sean, since 1999, and I'm not leaving until it goes into production, but it's been a struggle. As you said, we were somewhat of a darling in the market. We brought this property from 3 million ounces to 10 million ounces over the course of about 24 or 25 months. And then the downturn started, and not only couldn't I raise any money, I couldn't even get people to answer the telephone. And it got tough enough that in 2015, I was drawing down on my home equity line of credit here in the U.S. to fund Sandspring to keep it in business. Fortunately, we were found by a pretty famous Canadian investor, Frank Justra, and when Frank closed the deal to take a position in the shares, I said to him, Frank, you did two things today. One, you saved my company, and two, you saved my marriage. Oh. So it's been quite a tumble ride, if you will.
Yeah, no, it's no joke. I mean, you make light of it. You've got a great attitude about it, which I commented here in the pre-interview as we were trying to get our audio to work. And I really like that about you. But let's talk specifics about the company. Well, if you don't mind, let me get your thoughts on 2019 and 2020. Is the gold mining sector about to get hot? Because I personally believe it's far past time for the gold price to go higher as nation states continue to only indebt themselves and Russia and China hoard gold at an unbelievable pace. I think in November of 2018 alone, Russia hoarded 1 million ounces of physical. Is 2019 and 20 our year?
I believe so, Sean. And I have to defer to people that I have tremendous respect for in the market and what they've seen. Frank Justra, who's one of our largest shareholders, just authored a piece which he's got on his website. And he goes through why he thinks we're going towards disastrous economic times and why he is such a strong believer in at least hedging some portion of your wealth with an investment in precious metals. And as you know very well, the run that's to be made in gold is eclipsed only by the run that's to be made in silver. So we've had the fortunate opportunity to diversify into a small silver property, which we'll talk about. But yes, I think that the market is poised. The gold price will run. And as you know, the gold stocks typically run a little behind the price of gold, but the gold equities are a tremendous leverage play as the gold price is increasing. So yes, I think some of the wounds that we've all had inflicted on us in the last few years are going to have an opportunity to get healed.
Well, I hope so. I mean, the juniors are a gamble, but I think in the area of the casino that is the junior mining companies, it's best to look at the best ones. And so let's talk
Yes.
a little bit about Sandspring. So 10 million ounces of gold, 4.1 million ounces of which are proven and probable. How long before you can get this thing into production? What is the timeline currently?
It really depends, Sean, on how we approach this. Since Frank Schuster got involved in 2015, we've also been fortunate enough to keep Wheaton Precious Metals as a key financial partner with us. And then last year, a very significant gold company from South America, Gran Colombia Gold, became our single largest shareholder. And we have been something of a holding pattern, waiting for the price of gold to improve, because we're all of the same mind that Frank Schuster has been. Don't do anything that can really take the upside away from the 10 million ounce resource that we have. And so we've needed, up until now, a stronger gold price. We believe we're on track right now with assistance from Gran Colombia, Wheaton Precious Metals, and some exploration success that we've had over the last couple of years to be able to come forth with a plan in the next few months that will show the market and show our shareholders, some long-suffering, long-standing shareholders, how we can get this property into production, even if over the next 12 months we're seeing gold price move back and forth. So we really are excited about where we're going and the opportunities we have to put this property on a construction track, hopefully yet this year in 2019.
Well, let me do a full disclosure here. I forgot to do that at the beginning. I'm not a shareholder currently in Sandsprings, but I may take a position in the future. And for those interested, it trades on the TSX Venture as SSP and on the over-the-counter in the States as SSPXF. So let me ask you this. I know it's an open pit mining operation. I was listening to a 2017 interview you did over at Swiss Resource Capital, and you mentioned silver and copper as a byproduct of the mining at Sandsprings, which I think is of interest to our viewers, and it will help offset some of the costs of mining the gold, obviously. So tell us about that. Tell us about the copper and silver component.
Well, copper, we're not a really rich copper deposit, but we will produce about 500 million pounds of copper over the life of the mine. So as you mentioned, Sean, that byproduct credit, as it's accounted for in the cost of producing gold, is quite significant for us over the life of the mine, as long as the copper is somewhere in the 250 and above range. And I've noticed several places where copper is being projected at a long-term price of $3 to $3.50. So that's a very significant byproduct credit for us. The silver isn't a major factor, but it will come into play as we move forward in the production timeline here.
Well, since we're on the topic, can I get your thoughts on silver? Well, let me get your thoughts on a couple of things. First of all, silver at $15, $16, $14 an ounce to me is absolutely absurd, given the trillions, literally hundreds of trillions of dollars in debt, including derivatives all over the planet at this point. Okay, I'm a broken record as it relates to that subject. But what really gets me is when I see the real lives, actual lives of real people like you, like Keith, like me, like investors in mining stocks, absolutely decimated by what can, I think, best be described as the criminal manipulation of the gold and silver prices by the LBMA, by the criminals on Wall Street, by JP Morgan, by all of these big international banks, Deutsche Bank. At what point, by the way, Deutsche Bank has never been in worse shape. It's never had a lower share price, and it has probably the largest derivatives portfolio on the planet. So for anybody who thinks this house of cards isn't about to come down, look no further than Deutsche Bank. At what point do those of us who are honest investors get our comeuppance here, Rich?
Well, I think I certainly believe sooner rather than later. And I think that, you know, as so many people point out, including you, Sean, we don't know the exact moment or the exact catalyst that's going to break this loose. But with all of the issues that you've identified and have talked about in several of your presentations, there it's a perfect storm coming in terms of where we sit in the world economy and where gold and silver, especially silver, have tremendous room to run.
Well, you got that right. And I think as we look at fiat currencies across the globe, those don't have tremendous room to run. They're all going to go down because the more fiat they print, the less each one is worth. So folks, with your dollar in your pocket or your hourly wage, maybe you just went and got a job at the Amazon warehouse and they're going to pay you 15 bucks an hour. That is only going to lose value over the next 10, 20, 30 years. Whereas you can throw gold at the bottom of the ocean here, Rich, and 100 years from now, it's still going to buy a heck of a lot more than $1,200 worth of fiat.
Well, that's right. And as they say, every ounce of gold that's ever been produced is still here. And and although the amount of gold we're producing is declining, which is also another interesting subject to talk about.
That's actually on my list of things I wanted to ask you about, peak gold. I love this.
Yeah.
This is serendipitous. It was on my list. I want to ask you this about peak gold. Do you think peak gold was hit in 2013, 14? And at what point did the gold majors, which are all producing less and less year over year, at what point did they start to look at juniors like Sandspring and start gobbling them up?
Well, you know, I think peak gold has some truth to it. And it's not just me talking that way. The World Gold Council talks about that. The chairman of the board of Goldcorp, Ian Telfer, said that as recently as June of last year, that gold production is declining and these ounces are going to be much, much harder to replace. You can see Newmont projecting a couple of years ago that their production in 2021, 2022 would be down by 7 to 8%. Just as you say, we've seen this monstrous merger between Randgold and Barrick as a way to try to leverage up two different companies. That'll be a very interesting exercise to see if it works. So the majors have to replenish. And if you go back, Sean, and look, it's easy to see when we hit the wall in 2013, 14, that the first thing the majors cut to stay alive was exploration. So there's almost no pipeline of exploration projects. The other important and interesting fact is that it's been well documented over the years that from the day I find a significant hard rock deposit to the day I put it in production is at a minimum 10 years and more likely 15. So the majors are not going to explore their way out of this. Majors have always relied upon the juniors to bring the exploration dollars and new prospects to them, but the juniors have not been able to raise any money either. So if you look at the list of the top 10 mining resources, gold resources in South America that exist today that are owned by a junior, you'll see that Sandspring's Toraparo deposit is number 2. And I believe if you look at number 1 and compare it, you'll see that we're much more advanced. We have a much bigger proven and probable reserve base. And the fact that we're fully permitted and have our 3 stalwart partners, Sandspring's got to be one of the first groups that's going to be looked at as these majors start to see the resurgence in gold price.
Well, one of the things as I hear you talk that just occurs to me, I'm thinking about the LBMA and the manipulation. So the price of gold is supposed to be telling us a story, but we're getting a false story from the price of gold and silver because of the manipulation. Because in a fair market, the price of gold would be rising as the international debt of nation states explodes. And we have not really been seeing that. We haven't been seeing it. I've spoken with some folks that tell me the fair price of gold right now should be $55,000 an ounce. It could be $65,000 an ounce. It could be higher than that, Rich. And so I guess at the end of the day, what I'm wondering is, where is the supply going to come from in the future if the manipulation ends? If the house of monetary cards comes down and the manipulation is forced to end, if the Deutsche Bank derivatives book blows up, where will the gold come from that people are going to demand? Because as I said previously, China's hoarding the stuff. They mine it there. They keep most of it. Russia, same thing. Plus, Russia's importing a boatload of gold every single month. Where will the physical gold come from when the house of cards comes down?
Yes, it's very clear, Sean, as you've documented elsewhere, and other people have too, that all of these paper exchanges, paper sales, paper transfers have completely overwhelmed the available gold inventory that would be available to satisfy physical delivery of what I think I own. So the fact, when all of this, as you're saying, and I can't believe it's got to happen almost, that when all of that comes apart, there's going to be such a mad scramble for gold that, at least on a somewhat short-term basis, the price could go. You can't predict how high the price could go.
Well, we've been saying that for a long time, but the funny part is that it's science. I mean, it's fact. It's not hard to take a look at the mathematics of the global debt situation and conclude that all we're seeing is a paper game. The whole thing has been papered over, and you and I both know that can't go on forever. So I just want to remind folks that this isn't a solicitation to buy or sell any stock. You have to do your own due diligence. It's an informational interview, but I'm glad to have these types of interviews, because I do think when the house of cards comes down, some of these mining stocks are going to go to the moon. And in the case of Sandspring Resources, it trades on the TSX as SSP and on the over-the-counter in the States as SSPXF. And Rich Munson is the CEO. Rich, final word from you. If you want to give folks a 90-second elevator pitch, feel free. But I really appreciate your time and your candor, and I love your sense of humor.
Well, I've been a firm believer that if I can't laugh a little at myself and at my situation, I'm in the wrong place. So,
well, I'm glad your marriage survived.
Yes, it has. 40 years this year.
Well, congrats. Congratulations.
Oh, yes, that's an accomplishment. As an aside, my wife says it's because I'm gone all the time, but I like to think there's other reasons. But, the elevator pitch, if you will, Sean, is 10 million ounce resource, one of the biggest in Latin America, owned by a junior company, well developed. We've got environmental authorizations. We have what mining companies talk about these days as a good social license. We're well respected in the country. We do a lot of things for the people there. We have a trio of very sophisticated, full gold entrepreneurs and gold companies behind us who are helping us, watching us, what we're doing, and are dedicated, just as I am, to getting this property into production.
Excellent. And did we fail to mention that the project is in South America, and that's a mining-friendly jurisdiction you guys are in, correct?
Yes, we're in the country of Guyana. It's an emerging country. If you take a look at any of the oil markets, you'll see that the biggest oil discovery in the world in the last few years is offshore Guyana. So lots of things happening in that jurisdiction.
Yeah, one of the richest resources areas in the world down there in Guyana, South America. All right, guys, our guest has been Rich Munson, the CEO of Sandspring Resources. Rich, thank you so very much for your time. I really appreciate it.
No problem at all. Happy to do it, Sean.
All right. Thank you so much. And guys, thank you so much. Do your own due diligence, but I think this one is an interesting story. And thanks so much for tuning in. We very much appreciate your support. And check us out for real news 24/7 at sgtreport.com. God bless. Bye-bye.
If we have an indication that the dollar's topped out too, and it starts to roll over, then you have the three things all happening at the same time, which is exactly what happened in the prior high on gold at close to $2,000.